live stream, and I've been off for a couple of weeks for the holidays. Hope everyone had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I know it can be tough for some people getting together with family, but if you're one of those people, try to make it good because family is important. All right, so jumping into it, we've got probably a bunch of questions. Yeah. Try to get through as many as we can. If you have any questions during the live stream, drop them in the chat and I'll try to get to them as soon as I see them. Let me see if I can pull them up. So the first one's from Sherry Jalima Green. She says, please give me your opinion on nicotine patches for long COVID. You may have answered this before, but I'd really like to know. Thank you. So we're not sure what's going on with nicotine, but a lot of some people get significantly better when they take nicotine, either in patch form or as gum or in any way, however they take it. And other people feel no difference at all. So this is similar to a lot of long COVID and a lot of treatments in general. Really, there really aren't any treatments that everyone responds to. 100%. There's no treatment that works 100% of the time, but there are treatments that work most of the time, and sometimes it's kind of a coin flip, and it's difficult to predict who they're going to work for until you just try them. So that goes for really all the long COVID treatments I've seen, including ivermectin and steroids, and and some of the treatments I personally think are actually addressing the root cause issue, and others may not be addressing the root cause issue. Like steroids are probably just kind of papering over the problem. They're suppressing the immune system response. And most symptoms are due to the immune system response. And people mistake the symptoms for the actual problem itself, and they mistake the cause of the symptoms for the actual problem. So oftentimes they'll think that their immune system's like confused or something, when in fact the immune system is doing its job. It's trying to get rid of the actual problem. It's trying to remove it from your body. It's trying to fight it off, and that creates inflammation and symptoms. So what might be going on with the nicotine patches? Nicotine might be kicking off spike protein from nicotinic acid acetylcholine receptors, so that your body can then get rid of it. That's a possibility. And another possibility is that it's just activating receptors that are not really involved in the pathology, or those receptors might have been downregulated. And basically you're benefiting from the mechanism of action of nicotine, which is to make you more alert as well as feel calmer. So it's got an interesting mechanism in action where it not only makes you feel alert, but also helps you feel a little bit calmer. So people who have used nicotine in the past may recognize that. The downside, of course, is that it can be addictive, and depending on the way that you get it, it can also cause cancer. And it's just one of many hacks, that help some people feel better. And I'm not sure if it's kicking spike off of receptors, allowing your body to get rid of the spike, permanently by excreting it in your urine, then it could be addressing the root cause issue. But if it's just kind of giving you a shot of adrenaline and raising, making you more aware and helping with brain fog because of its usual effects, right, on alertness and cognition, then it may not be addressing the root cause at all. And it may just be, a Band-Aid that's helping you feel better. And, one way to see that would be you try it and then you stop it and your symptoms just come right back, versus trying it for a while, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, and then tapering off and you continue to feel fine. Now, some people, it's probably more complicated than that, because it could still be a Band-Aid. Like, I think steroids are probably a Band-Aid in most people, even the low dose ones. Yet when some people take the steroid for a period of time and then taper off of it, it seems like they're fine and their symptoms don't come back. In those cases, I think that it's possible that the steroids just suppress the immune system response long enough that the immune system kind of gives up, and it perhaps gave the problem that the immune system was trying to resolve a chance to hide in your body better, or just a second, I'm going to plug in my computer or go a little deeper. And hide, better, basically. So we do know that a lot of pathogens can hide pretty well, right? And they can burrow in pretty deep. So that's a possibility. And what you'll see with those people is that they'll get better, and then some stressor will come along and they'll get sick again. So they haven't actually fixed the problem. They'll get sick in the same way that they got sick before. So they haven't actually addressed the root cause issue. So nicotine, I don't think I would not use it long term. I might use it short term for somebody and see if it helps. But the best way to address it is anything really is to have a comprehensive game plan, of how you're going to approach the thing, and including lifestyle and diet and supplements and everything, the whole 9 yards, which will help to recruit all of your body systems. Your own immune system. It'll help recruit your immune system to actually solve the underlying problem. And it's usually going to be a combination of toxins and pathogens that are causing that underlying problem. And once the toxins and pathogens, once you've helped your body get rid of the toxins and the pathogens and given your body everything it needs to function correctly, then your immune system will just go back to normal on its own, because there will be no enemy to fight anymore. And that's really the best way to solve problems. Any other way just appears to be a solution when it's not actually a solution. And the reason it gives off that false appearance is that one way or the other, you haven't gotten rid of the toxins and pathogens, but you've stopped the response to them. And now you don't see any symptoms anymore for at least a period of time. So that's basically what I know about nicotine. There's no hard answers here, unfortunately. I think that it's all, qualified by what's actually going on with the specific patient. And this could be a part of the solution for some people, and it may not work at all for other people. So I don't think it's a silver bullet. It's not a panacea that works for long COVID or vaccine injury every single time. But when it works really well for some people, and I have seen people appear to resolve their problem. Whether or not it's fully resolved, I don't know, and they may not know for some time. So this is one of the risks of just kind of willy-nilly trying different things without being sure what's actually happening. You end up where you're not sure whether you've actually resolved the problem or whether it's just gone into hiding and it's just waiting, for a stressor or some, future infection or something, and then it rears its ugly head again. All right, so from Mark Dice, he asks, my wife had exposure to 2 Pfizer jab people in her car. It was over 3.5 years ago. Her period is still messed up, supposedly from that, or it's suspected from that. She has vision issues as well, stabbing headaches. A lot of other issues have gone away. Is the exposure just as if you would have taken the shots yourself? And what are they shedding? Is it the spikes, the banana particle, or the mRNA? Thanks so much for your time and help. Yeah, it could be any of the above or all of the above. Again, we don't actually know for certain. I don't think the exposure is the same as having gotten the shots yourself. But there is something has triggered her immune system, and it's trying to fight off something, right? Toxins, pathogens, right? So whether it's the spike or LNPs, or the modified RNA, or all of the above, it could just be the lipid nanoparticles. They can stimulate the immune system, and that may be all of it, and it's just that it's now in her body, and her body's trying to get rid of it, and that effort at trying to root out this problem is creating these symptoms, right? So it's kind of a battlefield. Her body is now turned into a battlefield where she's trying to fight off invaders and get rid of them. So, the usual approach to this is let's do whatever it takes to make my symptoms go away. Again, that's not the right approach. It'll make you feel better in the short run, or it may or may not. You sometimes you have trouble getting rid of the symptoms. And if it makes you feel better, it doesn't always mean that you've actually solved the problem. And oftentimes, if your entire approach was predicated on just making the symptoms go away, usually it's not the right approach, and you end up making the underlying problem worse, and then it comes back later, as I was saying before. So, circumstantially, it seems that she developed a shedding reaction, and now she's dealing with it. So. And it's what we typically see with people is that their immune system is riled up, right? There's inflammation, and their nervous system is also riled up. So there's autonomic dysfunction, and that actually itself contributes to ongoing inflammation. And like I said before, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's trying to accomplish a purpose. It's trying to help you, but it needs help, and it doesn't need to be hindered. So sometimes what people do for treatment actually ends up hindering their immune system and actually solving the problem. So optimally, you take supplements and you take binders and you take things that help your immune system do the job that it's trying to do of getting rid of the toxins and or pathogens that are contributing to the symptoms themselves. All right. And how do you do that? Like there's no one path, unfortunately. There's no one generic protocol that works for everyone. You have to take into account the person's starting point, their lifestyle, where they are in their life journey, where they live, their emotions, their relationships. And because all of these things are interconnected, they're all going to help determine which organs are most affected and how the immune system's responding, and will help determine how we help to marshal all of the person's resources to get rid of the problem. So if somebody's interested in doing this in a really comprehensive way, then there's no one better than my partner, Hakeem Shabazz Ahmed, at mygotodoc.com/Hakeem, Hakim. Check him out if you really want a kind of a permanent solution. It's not going to be easy. It's actually usually going to be very, very difficult. And sometimes it's the most challenging thing somebody's ever done. It can take hours every day to complete his protocols, but they will solve not only the problem that you see, but the problem that you don't see, the problem that will shorten your lifespan and your health span, even if it doesn't pop up for decades. But the problem, most people alive nowadays in the West they're headed for a fall in the future, and they have a serious problem. They have a serious toxic and pathogen load in their bodies that's just not visible yet. And it continues to build, and eventually it will catch up with them, and they will have symptoms and disease. And, so anyway, I think his protocols are helpful preventative medicine, the most helpful preventative medicine there is, because they deal with those problems and get rid of them. And the greatest benefit will usually be apparent further along the road, towards the end of somebody's life, when they're not going to end up as sick as everyone around them. They're not going to age as quickly, and they'll have a longer health span, essentially. All right, so Lydia Samuel says, what does the ANA lab work pattern cytoplasmic A mean? Yeah, I don't remember. You got to ask, let's see if we can look it up, but yeah, I haven't evaluated ANA for a while. But yeah, so I'm not the right person to ask. It's just not something I do normally. But let's just see. It may be associated with autoimmune liver disease. But all of these tests, they're not super sensitive or specific, right? So I don't know. I don't like using these tests. I don't like using a lot of tests in general because we're basically looking at antibodies with the ANA panel. This is your own immune system's response to something, right? And the assumption that people who are sending off these tests have is that your immune system is confused and it's creating antibodies to your own tissues for no good reason, right? So cytoplasmic antibodies, essentially. So the cytoplasm is outside the nucleus inside of a cell. So the cytoplasm is everything that's within the cell membrane, but outside the nucleus. And so there's a lot of stuff in there, and your body can develop antibodies to some portions of, your cells. Why would it do that? Why would your immune system create something that could go and attach to something of your own self? Well, the reason I think your immune system would do that is because your own self has become infected or is harboring toxins and or pathogens. And now your immune system needs a handy way of identifying and killing those cells that have been targeted. And so that stem cells can replace the cells that the infected or, affected cells. And eventually you can get the problem out of your body entirely and replace, all of those infected or toxin affected cells with new cells, healthy new cells that are not infected or affected. So the entire approach of the mainstream endocrinologist or rheumatologist is probably wrong. And when they're checking these antibodies, they're going to give you immunosuppressants, and they're going to try to give you targeted immunosuppressants to stop just the specific immune system cells involved in creating the immune response. And so you have these modern, quote unquote, wonder drugs for rheumatological diseases that target very specific, immunological pathways. And the more specific they get, the more they drill down into specific pathways, oftentimes fewer side effects there are, but there are still a lot of side effects. And the biggest one is that you're basically messing with the immune system, right? So it's, immunodeficiency and susceptibility to problems. And I would argue that the biggest effect of hindering your own immune system in any way from doing what it's trying to do is that you're going to allow what it's trying to attack and trying to get rid of for you to continue to proliferate, right? You're going to basically blind your immune system as much as and tie it up and prevent it from attacking a specific problem within you. And so that problem just continues to spread like wildfire, and it gets more and more deeply rooted inside your cells. And so eventually it overwhelms immunosuppressant that you've given, and then the immune system wakes up and starts fighting it again. But at this point, the problem's much, more broadly dispersed and much worse. It's multiplied a lot more than it would have if you had just let your immune system handle it in the beginning. And now the symptoms are worse, right? So it may even appear to be a different disease. Yeah, there's this whole direction of checking what the immune system is doing and then trying to address those specific things with specific treatments is faulty. Now you can check, and maybe it gives you some idea that there's a problem, and you may have an idea of where the problem is, you may need liver support, right, if the problem's in your liver. But we can also just assume that your liver is involved, because it basically always is, right? Your liver is always involved in detox, and essentially if you haven't done any detox work, your liver has probably been overwhelmed with all the toxins that we're exposed to in the modern environment. So we always provide liver support for every single patient. We don't need any test telling us that their liver is under stress or that the problem's in their liver. The problem's always in the liver. So I don't know. I mean, it's very rare that you actually need to do any testing at all. And when you do testing, most people will misinterpret the testing. So if they see something low, they'll assume you need to raise it. And if they see something high, they'll assume you need to lower it. And if you force it up or down, then you're going to worsen the problem. But if that out of whack lab tells you, okay, that there's a root cause issue here of toxins, pathogens, whatever, or deficiency of some nutrient, and you know how to interpret it, and you know how to correct that and help the body actually accomplish what it's trying to do instead of hindering the body from doing so. So we're actually trying to help your immune system do what it's doing rather than obstructing it. So yeah. All right, so Nancy says, not sure if this is a place I can ask this, but I've been dealing with COVID on my 11th day. I followed the protocol using ivermectin, but still not seeing any improvement. All the improvement I think I should. Do I continue with ivermectin? Yeah, I mean, with only that much information, I would say keep going on the ivermectin and talk to somebody, who knows how to treat these things. If you started on the first day of symptoms, it's very rare to be going on your 11th day. So I would usually assume somebody did not start on day one. They started maybe on day 3, 4, 5, or 6. And you may not have started with the right dose. So maybe you used 0.2 milligrams per kilogram and you should have used 0.6 milligrams per kilogram. So, you may have used only a third of the dose that would have been effective. You may need a higher dose now. And once it's gone into its second week, you're basically left with a complete immune response to the issue. And at that point, it can linger for a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks. Most of the symptoms can go away, except for a few lingering symptoms like a chronic cough that can last for months in some cases. And that's not specific to COVID. That's specific to, that's not actually specific at all. That happens with all kinds of infections, all kinds of viral infections. And if it is actual long COVID, then there can be fatigue and brain fog and, the whole 9 yards. So, if you feel like this on your 11th, if you feel sick still on your 11th day, the number one thing you should be doing is resting, and you shouldn't be exercising until you feel back to normal completely for a few weeks, because that can oftentimes trigger a worse reaction and actually create long COVID, which can be hard to fix, but it's certainly possible to fix. So I don't know, I can't tell you exactly what to do without having a lot more information. But generally speaking, I would continue the ivermectin and now start doing other things. Like if you've been under a lot of stress, you need stress management. You need breath work every day, 20, 30 minutes of breath work a day. You need to sleep really well. You can't be missing sleep in a recuperative phase like this. You need to be getting sun during the day, stop avoiding lights at night, going to sleep really early, watching the sunrise, maybe doing some infrared therapy and eating right. So the best thing to do is to go in the beginning, at least low carb and an AIP diet, autoimmune paleo protocol diet, and get better, and then you can taper off of stuff, slowly. Beth Week says, any suggestions for the best pro and prebiotics when taking an antibiotic? So it's best not to take antibiotics, honestly. In my experience, less than 1% of people who take antibiotics actually need antibiotics. And I think it's way less than 1%. I think it's probably 0.1%, honestly. I have worked, with the largest telemedicine company in the US for years, or I used to work with them years ago, and before the pandemic. And they had a policy where they expected less than 30% of upper respiratory visits to be prescribed an antibiotic. And so they would send you a report card on how you were doing, how often are you prescribing antibiotics for upper respiratory visits. And my prescribing rate was less than 1%, like way less than their cutoff, and I think way less than almost every other doctor. And all I did to achieve that was literally follow the mainstream guidelines for when to prescribe antibiotics. I followed them to the letter, okay? When you follow the actual guidelines based on actual research of when people actually need antibiotics, just by following the guidelines to the letter, you will hardly ever prescribe antibiotics. So antibiotics are, and you've heard this in the news, probably for decades now, that they are way, way, way overprescribed. So, I mean, you could argue that that's like a big psyop and, they're trying to make people chronically sick. I don't think so. Your immune system, okay? Your immune system is supposed to do, but it doesn't always do the job very fast. And my concern with antibiotics is that, again, you're interfering with the natural course of things in exactly the same way that a lot of people are interfering with the natural course of things in chronic disease. There's a problem, there's an infection, and it's also creating toxicity in your body. Toxins are being produced. And now your body has to go and it has to destroy all the weak cells that have been affected by this, that have been invaded by the pathogen, that have been affected by toxins, that are on their last legs, and so your immune system wants to go and destroy every trace of the pathogens, wherever it is, whichever cells have been affected or infected, and it wants to flush all that stuff out of your body so that you can rebuild stronger, right? And instead of allowing the immune system to do all that work, you kill the pathogen halfway through with an antibiotic. And the antibiotic also harms your own mitochondria, because your mitochondria are very similar to bacteria, right? So now you've harmed your own mitochondria, which are the powerhouses that make ATP in your cells, that drive everything in your body, right? That create the energy of your body. They're the energy powerhouses, the factories, basically. And you've killed off all of your beneficial bacteria also. And the beneficial bacteria are actually a part of you, okay? So they're part of what makes your immune system work. They're literally a part of your immune system. And it depends, however you want to think about it. You can think about it as you're outsourcing things to foreigners or whatever. But the bacteria are part of a superorganism, which we think of as ourselves, right? They activate certain hormones for you. They create certain nutrients for you. Like, they're an indispensable part of you, okay? They're just not quote unquote human cells, but they are passed down mother to child and father to child also, right? And so you get the same microbiome that your parents had, along with their genes and along with your human cells. And they're affected by the environment that you're in. They're affected by your lifestyle. They're affected by all this stuff. And really, they're just like, it's kind of like a blurry boundary of what is human and what's not, right? And so, certainly you can survive without them, but you don't thrive without them, right? So you're killing them. You're harming your own mitochondria, which can lead to a lot of the side effects that antibiotics cause later on. And you may not be completing the whole job that you were supposed to complete during that infection, right? So basically, yeah, don't take antibiotics. Almost never do you need an antibiotic. It's better to just be sick, okay? Go through the entire course of the illness, recuperate, rest as much as you need to. Because repeatedly doing this, where you cut short these infections, you don't let your body deal with them appropriately, sets you up for the next infection. I don't remember the last time I was sick at this point, okay? People who take antibiotics every time they get sick tend to get sick a lot, right? And people who don't ever take antibiotics, like me and my family, like, we literally have not taken antibiotics in years, okay? My kids hardly ever get sick. I hardly ever get sick. My wife hardly ever gets sick. They do still sometimes get sick, but they don't, I think because they don't get as much sun as I do. The sun is like the best, immune booster out there. When they get sick, they're sick for a few days and then they get over it, right? Like, literally, I don't think my kids have been sick in the last 10 years more than 3 days in a row, right? It's usually like one day of being sick and really tired and, not wanting to do anything. And the next day they're recovering, and the third day they're back to normal. Okay. Sometimes my wife is sicker longer than that. Again, she's not as strict as me on diet and sun and sleep, especially, right? So if you're really strict on getting sun and getting good sleep and going to sleep early and sleeping through the night every single night, and grounding and all this stuff, and you've had enough years after your last antibiotic to like completely get it out of your system, you just don't get sick that much, right? And when you do it, barely phases you, right? And so what does that mean, right? It means that if we're about to go on vacation and we start coming down with something, we just go on vacation with the illness, right? And again, we're better pretty quick, right? And we're able to enjoy the vacation. If I have, some deadline I'm working on, and I start to come down with something, I just either extend the deadline or I just work through, I just push through, I just do it, right? I feel miserable and I just keep going. And again, it hasn't been years. It's been years since I've had to do that because I just prioritized, I just understood what's actually going on. All these shortcuts that you try to take just come back to bite you, right? And they just make your life harder in the long run. So it's like, the kid with the marshmallow test, right? Like, can you wait 15 minutes for a marshmallow, or are you going to gobble it up right away, right? So if you can, just decide that, and it's not really a marshmallow, right? It's more like, can you put up with, being sick now so that in the future you don't have to be sick, right? As often or at all. But can you put up with a little bit of inconvenience now so that in the future you have much less inconvenience? Or are you going to try to take the easy way out every single time, right? And it will usually coincide with some sort of stressor, whether that stressor is job related or relationship related or even vacation related, right? So anything, right? Whether good or bad stress. And so like, it always happens at the worst possible time, right? You start coming down with something, you're like, I can't be sick right now, right? Well, why are you sick right now when you can't be sick? It's because you can't be sick that you're getting sick, right? It's because there's something stressing you out a little bit. So I don't know. I mean, I have failed to convince most people. The people who are convinced in the audience are going to remain convinced, and the ones who aren't, I don't know, maybe I've moved it a little bit, moved you a little closer to being convinced with this little tirade of mine. But I would highly recommend just biting the bullet, letting it run its course, avoiding antibiotics in almost all situations. Now, most people are just like traumatized by our modern upbringing, and they just literally just can't assess, the situation properly. And it's affected by all the physicians who also can't assess the situation properly. So I don't know how successful this is going to be because, everyone's always going to think, well, I really do need antibiotics, right? I really am that sick. If you're not in a hospital, it's extremely unlikely that you're that sick, right? Like, you could feel like you're on your deathbed, but if you don't need to be hospitalized, you're not on your deathbed, right? Like, if you've been assessed by somebody who doesn't think you need to be hospitalized, it's, of course, people will be like, oh, but if I don't, then I will be hospitalized. So I can't tell you what to do in a specific situation. All I can say is that running the numbers, it's just almost never required, right? Almost never does somebody need an antibiotic. And yes, that means those people who are convinced they need an antibiotic, most of them also don't need an antibiotic. And it includes those people who started off sick and then they got worse, right? They also don't usually need an antibiotic. And it applies to sinusitis, it applies to bronchitis, it applies probably to most pneumonias even. So I could only find one study because no one wants to study this stuff. I mean, no one can even imagine it. But there was a study on mild to moderate outpatient pneumonia Again, you didn't need to be hospitalized, but they had diagnosed pneumonia, not bronchitis, not just a cough, not an upper respiratory infection, a lower respiratory infection, a literal pneumonia on an x-ray, right? And they gave some people antibiotics and they gave other people placebo, and the outcomes were essentially the same. So, your doctor's not going to trust that one study. They're going to be like, you need to do more research, blah, blah, blah. So if somebody sees pneumonia, they're going to give you an antibiotic. But what I'm pointing out here is that even with pneumonia, most people probably don't need an antibiotic, and there's research to back it up. Most skin infections, basically all ear infections probably don't need an antibiotic. You can't say all, right? There's always going to be some that are, super terrible and, the person's immune system isn't working, whatever. And nowadays, perhaps, there's more people with immune systems that don't work. But the antibiotic just gets you into this vicious cycle where your immune system works, more and more poorly every time you come up against something. So anyway, it's not always easy to extricate yourself. I know some people who have been taking antibiotics for years, and it's like, they'll have sinusitis or something, and it doesn't meet the criteria for an antibiotic, and they know themselves that like this thing, it can go on for weeks until they take an antibiotic, and all of a sudden it stops. Yeah, fine. There are some people whose immune systems are so shot that they just can't deal with it. And probably why it's going on for weeks is because of how many times they've cut it short in the past. There's just a lot of work that their immune system needs to do, right? It's not just the current infection, it's all the prior, damaged tissue and perhaps persistent pathogens and toxins that are there. And when your immune system wakes up with a new infection, it's like, oh, there's a lot of old work that needs to be done to a lot of stuff to get rid of, a lot of spring cleaning here. And it just takes a long time to do all of it. And all of the mucus needs to come out, right? It's got stuff that needs to be expelled. And the worst case scenario is you keep doing that for years, and eventually turns into chronic sinusitis, right? Like you have toxins and pathogens, and then you have mold overgrowth, and it's there binding toxins that your body couldn't get rid of over the years. And you no longer have an acute issue, you have a chronic issue. It's never ending. So I think that's how a lot of chronic issues develop, is by mistreatment of the acute issues over and over again. So to answer your question, any suggestions for the best pro or prebiotics when taking antibiotics? So the best pro and prebiotics are just eating properly, right? So you can have, and again, some people can't tolerate these foods, but whatever. Let's assume you can tolerate the foods. Fermented foods, right? A lot of people can't tolerate fermented dairy, at least until they've gone through a lot of detox and healing. But if you can, then fermented dairy products, fermented vegetables, sauerkraut, stuff like that. Those are the best pro and prebiotics, like by far. There is a brand that I can't remember the name of it right now. Of a really, let me see if I can try to figure out the name of it. I think it's the E. coli Nissel 1917. It's only sold in Canada. Mutaflor. Yeah, Mutaflor. It's sold in Europe, Canada, and Australia. It's not sold in the US. So you have to get it shipped from Canada if you're in the US. Mutaflor has proven to be pretty helpful for some people. So that's one thing. But really, you have to just eat right and support your body, and Jerusalem artichoke and some other things are some prebiotics as well. Green bananas for some people can work really well as a prebiotic. So other than that, most probiotics are probably not alive, and there may be some short-term benefits while you're taking them that can last for a week or two after you stop, like that help modulate the immune system. but most of them don't stay in your body after you stop taking them. You can check out Sabine Hazan on Twitter. She may have, some branded probiotics that you can take. But yeah, I don't have, other than Mutaflor, anything I would honestly recommend. Maureen Hartnett says, any special treatment for tinnitus from long COVID? I've seen ivermectin work with tinnitus and make a huge difference, right? For people who had, actually my first case of long COVID was somebody with tinnitus, severe, horrible tinnitus. They couldn't even think or sleep or whatever. And it was like 90% better within a week of taking ivermectin. So escalating doses of ivermectin, like every week you increase the dose a little bit until you either get better or you have side effects and you can't keep increasing it. So that's one approach. And other than that, for some people, autonomic nervous system, therapies can help. So just calming down the nervous system can get rid of the tinnitus. And, I just need a individualized approach, right? I think for some people, the nicotine helped. So all the different therapies that people use for long COVID, and there are a bunch, low-dose naltrexone, low-dose steroids for a couple of weeks. All of these may help treat the tinnitus, but I think the therapy that most people don't try and that they should is like autonomic nervous system retraining. Basically, you're retraining your nervous system, you're calming it down, and that can oftentimes get rid of tinnitus. And if these things don't work, then you just need a comprehensive personalized protocol from somebody like Hakim Shabazz. So my gotodoctor.com/Hakim, Hakim. And I'm confident that he can get rid of tinnitus, but it usually isn't going to be super easy. It's going to take some work. And again, the basic approach is always you give your body everything it needs, including a bunch of things that you didn't even realize that that a human body needs, right? Like sun and sleep and grounding, and really nutritious, high density nutritional, foods, and help your body get rid of toxins and pathogens. Like if you do that and you do it long enough and support your organs that are doing that and take binders and all this stuff, you will get better, right? Unless there is a really strong, psychiatric or emotional component to it that needs to be addressed. And there always is a psychiatric, emotional / spiritual component to every disease. And sometimes it's so strong that your disease or your symptom doesn't go away until you address that. So part of the healing journey means addressing those higher level things, because ultimately everything does boil down to a multifaceted and multi-system and multi-level problem, right? Like everything is interconnected. There's no separating you out into physical and energetic and emotional and spiritual and intellectual beings. They're all one being. And so anything that affects one of those layers will affect all the other layers, right, in a similar way. And the causality can go in either direction. It can go from physical to spiritual, or from spiritual to physical, or from emotional to physical, or from physical to emotional. But they're all affected. They're all going to be affected. And so they all have to be treated as one. Gregory Lusignan says, do not take horse paste. First, everyone I read about who was trying to figure out how much horse paste to take for COVID was figuring it out wrong. They figured out to be around 0.2 milligrams per kilogram, which is way too low of a dose. Yeah, well, the horse paste on it, the dosing that's on the horse paste is for 0.2 milligrams per kilogram, because that's the usual dose for humans and horses. So obviously, if you needed 0.4 or 0.6, then you would double or triple that dose. Your dose needs to be from 0.4 to 0.6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight once a day. If you're not dosing properly, you're not going to get the results you wish to achieve. Yeah, so early on, 0.2 milligrams per kilogram seemed to work well for most people, but after the first 6 months or so, we all kind of migrated to using 0.4 to 0.6 milligrams per kilogram. So usually I just tell people to start at 0.6 milligrams per kilogram, whether they're treating acute or chronic COVID. And like I said, I mean, you can still figure it out from the horse pace dose, right? So it'll say like, give your horse, like depending on the weight of your horse, give it this much, right? So that much that it tells you for that weight is 0.2 milligrams per kilogram. So you can do the math and figure out what a higher dose would be. Andrea Ball says, I'm hearing that EDTA is essential for treating long COVID, but I also read that it can bond with mercury and deposit it in the brain per the Andy Cutler protocol, even oral EDTA. I don't know. This is the first time I'm hearing of it. We don't usually use EDTA, so it's possible that this is an issue that I wasn't aware of because I just don't use it. And it's not essential for treating long COVID in my experience. So I don't think that that's true. There's, a lot of different toxin binders that bind all toxins. Okay. They may bind some toxins better than other toxins, but they still bind all toxins, right? And there may be another binder that binds a specific toxin better than that binder that you're using, but you don't absolutely have to use EDTA. You can use other things, right? So bentonite clay and chlorella, and and a lot of people don't need to get to zeolite or EDTA or anything else. And a lot of people do just fine with even something as gentle and mild as chlorella. And basically utilizing your own body's detox pathways properly and stimulating them properly every day for months at a time, right? And your own body will get rid of the things. It doesn't absolutely require binders to get rid of the toxins that are in it. Binders will help, but the more gentle the binder, the better it is for starting off. And the biggest issue with getting rid of toxins is not supporting your body well enough during that process, in which case you can end up with severe reactions, and you can actually make yourself sicker, and the toxins, while they're making you sicker, will also be just recirculating and rebinding the tissues and not actually leaving your body. So you can overwhelm the detox pathways, so they can get clogged, essentially like a traffic jam. And so you need to do some prep work before detoxing. All right, so Colleen Tolentino says, what's causing the constant internal vibrations? It's been 3 years. My POTS doctor told me it's the dysautonomia, and another doctor said possibly MCAS. I've been to 2 neurologists, including a movement specialist, who told me they have no idea. I'm concerned since before they were just at night or upon waking, but now I feel them in my chest and abdomen all day. It's literally making me crazy. What can I do to help these? You gotta talk to my partner, Shabazz. mygotodoc.com/HAKIM. Yeah, it's probably related to dysautonomia and inflammation, which goes with dysautonomia in the peripheral nervous system. So you probably have, peripheral nervous system and central nervous system issue and autonomic nervous system issue leading to this symptom. And basically, right, like just like with everything, it's no different. We have to help your body gradually remove toxins, kill pathogens, and replace nutrients that are missing and required nourishment that you're missing, while eventually, usually within 1 or 2 months, we'll kind of circle back once everything has gotten a lot better, with physical interventions. We'll circle back and start talking about emotional, psychological root causes that have been around for usually decades that led to this, particular symptom and this particular problem happening, right? Or it made you susceptible to being affected in this way. And if you do that, if you do all that work, it can be some work, but it's worth it. Then the problem can actually be solved at a deep level, and it doesn't come back again in the future. And if it's not done properly at a deep level, you can feel better. You may find something that switches off your symptoms in the short run, but it doesn't actually solve your problem in the long run. And the problem is still there. It's just hiding underneath the surface. So breathwork is probably always going to be a part of this, right? Like, you have to calm down your nervous system. And that the best way to do that is with, breath work. So it's going to be 20 to 30 minutes a day. Just, suck it up and do it. So I've gone through, Shabaz's protocol, or at least, the one that he recommended for me. And it's hard for the first couple of months. It's definitely not a cakewalk. It's very difficult. It takes hours. You have to wake up really early so that, it doesn't eat into your day. And it just requires you to do all these things that are weird and that you don't want to do and that seem hard. And then after the first couple of months, it just finally you get used to it a little bit and it becomes much easier. But until then, you're kind of struggling against yourself, right? It just, so, but I think all of that kind of struggle helps also shift, your being in deeper ways that help you to actually start to get to the deeper issues that you're dealing with. So yeah, if you're ready for that, then mygotodoc.com/Hakeem is the best place in the world, I think, to actually solve your deepest problems. Carly Newton says, any suggestions on early treatment or meds to have on hand for the bird flu? Can you please provide an update on your experience with your personal detox journey? So two things here. I would basically keep ivermectin on hand, and again, sleep well, lose weight if you have extra weight, and get sunlight every day, and have good relationships. Don't get angry. Don't have bad, toxic emotions, and you'll be healthy. I recommend, I think everyone needs some basic kind of like liver support and detox, and, and support, right? Nutritional support. So I think everyone could probably do worse than having, some raw liver and a raw egg every day as kind of nature's super multivitamins. And then, if you're sick, you got to get better, right? So those are the main things. But in terms of medications, ivermectin, vitamin C, basically all the same stuff we use for COVID applies, I think, to bird flu as well. So I don't think you need Paxlovid. Paxlovid, has issues. Some people, sorry, not Paxlovid, the flu medication, Tamiflu. I don't think, sorry, I misspoke. What I was talking about was Tamiflu. I don't think people need Tamiflu for bird flu. But if you feel like you need it, go ahead. But it's just, it has issues. So Tamiflu, I personally think that the data suggesting it works for flu is pretty poor, and it can cause side effects, and it's just not as safe as ivermectin. I think it probably doesn't work as well as ivermectin. So there are indications that ivermectin works for the flu, and it should work for any flu virus, whether bird flu or human flu or whatever, any variant of the flu should be treatable with ivermectin. And you have to have it on hand. You have to be ready to go. So go to mygotodoc.com. You can get it's basically the same thing you would get for COVID. You can get that to be ready for bird flu if it becomes an issue, which who knows, right? Even if the mainstream media and everyone starts testing, it could just be a test-demic, a scam-demic, or not a real pandemic, but just like a testing epidemic where you cycle the PCR count high enough that, everyone tests positive for bird flu. So you're not going to know, because people get sick every winter, right? They come down with the flu and flu-like syndromes and viruses, right? There's hundreds of viruses, and they all kind of cause very, very similar symptoms. So usually, people come in with what looks like the flu, and you'll test them for the flu, and they don't have the flu, right? they just have one of, dozens and dozens of viruses that go around every year. So HMPV, I think, is going around in China right now. Sounds scary and weird, but it's a virus we've known about for 20 years, 25, 23, 24 years. It's been around. And obviously it's been around probably for tens of thousands of years, but we discovered it in 2001. And then other viruses, right? Other upper respiratory viruses, RSV, et cetera, et cetera. There's just, so many of them. So I think even people, even if bird flu becomes a thing, right? It turns into this pandemic. I mean, just the timing is, it's hard to believe that it's real, right? And if they release it, whatnot, whatever. Sure, I guess that's a possibility that they've weaponized the bird flu and they have it sitting there in a lab somewhere and they spring it on us. And they try to do the whole thing all over again, the whole pandemic thing all over again. Can't say it won't happen because last time around it proved to be the single most effective way of instituting lockdowns and social restrictions and all kinds of stuff, right? So if there's a strong enough reason, if there's a risk of societal breakdown in some way, right? If we have like a really terrible economic crisis or some sort of the debt explodes or some sort of social unrest, this disease scare tactic seems to be the thing that's worked best out of all of US history, at least, right? The thing that you scare people enough about their own lives, and other things that they've tried haven't worked, right? So it's a tool that worked really well for implementing tyranny before, and regardless how many people have woken up or not woken up, it could happen again very easily. I mean, most people are programmable, easily programmable, and it's just if you lie enough, eventually the lie turns into the quote unquote truth and people believe it. And they could, I'm sure they could do it in a much more nuanced and sophisticated way this time around, right? That could even fool people who were not fooled last time around because it was so, clumsy. So anyway, I don't know what's going to happen. It just seems like it worked so well for implementing tyranny that if tyranny needs to be implemented again, which eventually it probably will, be something that the quote unquote elite or the deep state feels that it needs to do, it will come back around, whether that's bird flu or something else. So anyway, it pays to be prepared, but the best preparation is just being healthy. That's best preparation. And, having these medications on hand, I think could save somebody else's life, even if you're healthy. So, a lot of people I know stock up on them, not only for themselves, but for their family and friends who don't believe that anything like that could ever happen. We are in, an era of a kind of like a Cold World War, right? That, there could be attacks on the homeland, on America, using chemical weapons, biological weapons, all kinds of things that aren't even admitted by the media because they would freak people out and scare them. So certainly that, it always pays to be prepared, I think. The amount of money that you need to spend to just be ready for something like that pales in comparison to the payback that you would get if it actually happens. So it's the best insurance. An update on my personal detox journey. Yeah, so I was passing parasites almost daily for like a month at least. Now, I'm not seeing a lot of parasites anymore. Now I'm going into the 4th month of this detox protocol, and I've started eating high quality meat and fish, salmon, and I was having sardines probably about 3 to 4 weeks into the protocol. So the beginning few weeks of the protocol was basically just vegetables, and was pretty difficult, to do. And then I started having sardines, and then in the last month or so, I started having really good quality red meat and salmon occasionally. But still focusing on a lot of vegetables and still doing a bunch of other stuff, right? So it's still doing everything that I was doing before. And, I'm not, I think we're trying to go gradually and slowly and not overwhelm the body, right? So, I still assume that there are deeper layers of biofilm and toxins and pathogens that need to come out. So I'm still doing everything that I was doing before. And my weight has stabilized. I probably lost like 30 pounds. Still probably, there's still excess fat around the belly, but not nearly as much as before. So a huge difference in my weight, but I do still think I'm holding on to something, whether it's estrogens or whatever, or actual like literal toxins that just haven't been released from the fat cells yet. And I think I may have seen like another worm yesterday after like a month of not thinking I was passing anything that I could see. Sleep has gotten really good. It was a problem for a long time, and then I could sleep, but I had to be kind of strict about like, okay, stop using the phone right at sunset. Otherwise, I would have trouble falling asleep, right? Now I don't have to be super strict anymore. I'll just lie down and just go to sleep, which is fantastic. It's amazing. It's like a game changer. I mean, it's just incredible. So sleep has continued to improve and become much, much more solid. I had chronic psoriasis, and it's a huge change. I mean, I used to like scrape, and it would be like snow coming off of my skin, right, on my knees. It would just like constantly flake off, right, and I would scrape it off, and it would just go everywhere. Now there's like nothing there. Just like I'm so used to scraping stuff off, but there's nothing left to scrape off. Kind of get addicted to scraping those flakes off, but there just aren't any flakes anymore. And yeah, but I do think there's a lot left to do. I think that my body is releasing toxins finally, now that I've kind of like paved the way for it to do so. And those toxins themselves cause like this really, really mild brain fog. And I just don't feel 100%. But I think that that's one of the things that you have to go through. So it's extremely mild. I mean, it's almost not something that it's almost, not noticeable, but it is there. And it's basically, I think that's what it is toxins are being released into my bloodstream, and they're affecting, brain function. But you have to do that. You have to go through that phase of gradually expelling the toxins and expelling. And it can go on for months. And eventually, you've gotten rid of everything that there is to get rid of, or most of it. And then your blood, is going to be a lot cleaner, and you're not going to have the brain fog anymore. So again, it's like almost unnoticeable, but I can tell that there is something there. Especially since in the past I've, and I think I've always had this really, really slight brain fog, except for this one time, like 20 years ago, where I got really healthy and my brain was like, my mind became super sharp and everything just seemed a lot more clear. So, yeah, I think that, all the stuff that people go through, getting antibiotics and vaccines as a child, and developing chronic inflammation, and then covering it up and not knowing how to treat it, and just doing the wrong things for decades. It will take months for most people who've had something building for decades to completely be resolved. So again, it's been 3 months. I think you just got to keep going and see where it takes you. Lydia says, what does the ANA lab work pattern? We already did this. I'm trying to reach your office. This is Lily. not so easy by chat or phone. After we get the prescription, what kind of oxygen concentrator do we get? You get, you can get any kind that you want. There's different ratings, right? How much oxygen they deliver, whether it's 5 liters per minute or 7.5 liters per minute, 10 liters per minute. We can write whichever, strength you want. They're more expensive, the stronger ones, to give you more oxygen per minute. There are none without prescription. She says even the ones without a prescription would be best. That there are not any oxygen concentrators without prescriptions. My partner really needs it. Should I get a portable one in home? Yeah. They're all relatively portable. I mean, you can move them around. Some of them are more portable than others. They can be wheeled around and they're smaller. So those ones are also going to be more expensive, but all of them can be like picked up and carried somewhere else and plugged in somewhere else. Some of them will have batteries. Some of them need to be plugged in to run. So the ones with batteries, obviously you could take them and they would actually be running while you're not plugged into power. And the other ones, you can move them from one place to the next, plug them in somewhere else and use them. So, I mean, we're not, what I would recommend is you go, there's always going to be a local medical supply. So go talk to them about what you're looking for and the different model and the different companies that make them. And, it's all going to come, depending on the person, it's going to come down to quality versus price in most cases. So as long as it's a reputable brand and I would recommend get the 10 liter per minute if you want to really be protected and be able to avoid the hospital as much as possible in the future if it's a prepper kind of thing. And also the same if it's just being used for like healing from chronic illness where you're trying to use oxygen therapy to stimulate stem cells. I would still use 10 liters per minute. And like an hour a day, basically. Yeah. But our office will usually call you back if we can't pick up the phone, but we try to answer the phone during normal business hours in the US, 9 a.m. to like 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can call us at 281-393-8266. All right, let me just check out the chat. So we've got one message here. I almost died from COVID-19. I got pneumonia. I was hypoxic. I came close to death, but God saved me. Now I'm dealing with long COVID. I'm on 5 liters of oxygen 24/7. I feel for your wife. God bless her. I also have lupus with antiphospholipid syndrome and Sjogren's syndrome plus mixed connective tissue disease, but I'm blessed. Yeah, so like with the oxygen, it's something that you would hopefully want to gradually taper off of the oxygen, the 5 liters of oxygen, but you have to do it really slowly and gradually so that your lungs can pick up the slack. And, if you are interested in, really deep healing, then go to mygotodoc.com/Hakeem. And this is my partner, Shabazz. He can help you. Dana says, nicotine patches, are these okay for those with POTS? It can be, and like I think just refer to the nicotine answer above that I gave to the first question. We oftentimes, we can't predict who they'll work for and who they won't work for. And in some cases, people will have, they'll feel a negative reaction. So if you do want to try nicotine patches, just start with a low dose and gradually increase it. And of course, nicotine can stimulate your heart and it can raise your heart rate and it can stimulate the autonomic nervous system. And so it may cause problems for people with POTS and it may not. It may improve, the symptoms in people who have a spike protein related problem. Ellen says, any info available for doctors or treatments that can help someone with CRPS, chronic regional pain syndrome, potentially vaccine induced? Yeah, check out mygotodoc.com/Hakeem. And, this is probably also just a neurological issue. The neurological system is it's completely inflamed and there's a feedback loop involved, and you just need to break the cycle, get rid of the toxins, pathogens, and calm down the nervous system, and it should be resolvable. Kevin says, I just got over my first case of COVID. Actually, I think we'll skip skip that. It's really long. It's like a whole paragraph. Let's see. Robin says improving kidney function may have been damaged by hospital treatment, remdesivir, or something else during the COVID inpatient stay. Yeah, it helps to eat kidney, raw kidney. So that's one thing. But other than that, like you need to, it's the same approach as anything, right? You have to give your body all the things that it needs. It needs sun, it needs sleep, it needs grounding, it needs nutritious food, right? So, and you need to help it get rid of toxins and pathogens. So this is the basic approach to healing anything. And then everyone with kidney issues, I mean, you're going to need, like a lot of us have been stressing our kidneys for a long time due to chronic stress, anxiety, fear-based responses to the modern world. And it can take months to rebuild, right, the kidney properly, but it's certainly possible. So, you know, on X, there's what is it? Somebody who says that they have kind of like a silver bullet for kidney disease. I'm blanking on his name. Anyway, if I remember it, I'll give you his name next time. Let me just see if I can find him. Goyech, Tim Goyech. Which Dr. Tim, which DRTIM. Anyway, he's supposedly got some interesting, amazing approach to treating chronic kidney disease and curing it, along with other illnesses too. So he has an approach that may be easier than, you know, others, but he's in Canada, and some patients he'll see online, and others he asks them to come in person. But anyway, you can check him out and see what you think. I'm not vouching for him. Like, I don't know specifically patients who have used his service, but it does seem like a lot of people have, and he's had great results. Again, I think that the best approach and the deepest approach is what Shabazz, my partner, offers. And doesn't require flying anywhere, but it does require work, because you're actually fixing the deepest problems that have been there for a long time. You're not just forcing tissues to regenerate while ignoring deeper toxic and pathogenic problems. Because like there's different approaches that can make somebody seem like they've solved their problem. So you can get rid of the things that are harming you, and then your body regenerates. Or you can strengthen the body so much that it overcomes the harms without getting rid of the harms. It's just suddenly has so much more energy or power that it kind of like overwhelms the ability of the harms to manifest themselves as harms without actually removing them. The problem with that is that eventually, if you don't address that root cause, you just strengthen one end of the equation so that the root cause becomes like submerged again. The root cause continues to worsen underneath the surface until eventually it's no longer submerged, and eventually it rears its ugly head again. So, you might find something that seems like a miracle therapy, like which Dr. Tim's therapy. But without doing like the actual hard work of detoxifying and killing pathogens and flushing out your system properly, it just comes back. And there's layers and layers of these things. Like they're deeply rooted in your body. They've been around for a long time, and you've driven them deeper and deeper into your tissues. And so you can't just root it all out at once. You can't just like kill it all at once, because it's so deeply intertwined with your own self that you would kill yourself to kill it, right? So it requires some finesse in it. That's why it takes time, and that's why you have to do it gradually and with sensitivity and finesse. So I'm fully convinced that the approach that Shabazz takes is the absolute best approach in the world, but it requires patience and it requires people to make some effort. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back next week, and if you did, please like and subscribe and share. Okay. And with that, I will see hopefully next week. I will be traveling, so I should be able to come on. All right, send us your questions in the meantime, and drop a comment or a reply to this. That helps the algorithm know that it's worthwhile content also. All right, everyone. Bye-bye.